Did you just say we're not? Or-
Yeah, I see, that's because
We're live?
We're live.
Okay. I would like to call the meeting to order with the pledge of allegiance and holy silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Any announcements other than Jamie Somerville is not able to be here tonight? Okay, we'll jump right in. Report from internal claims auditor.
Yes. So we had just finished one up to the end of May. So really, this is only from June 1st until September 13th was the last date that they're in checks. And as you can see, it's very few voids. Apparently GODT is very hard to spell. And then the rest is just the checks that are overrun due to print, which meant that there's too many charges on one check, so it took a second check, so that's the first one. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Anyone have any questions? Okay. Thank you.
there weren't a lot.
No, there's only like, eight voids, and one of them was just the name a couple times. And one was lost, otherwise,
Which is no relation to me for the record.
yes.
Oh.
No relation there. Yeah.
Okay.
We're still plugging on. It's been going very well ever since the two errors have been fixed as far as getting the new printer and the new system that we put in place. The voids are very rare.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Review draft 2023-24 financial audit report and management letter.
Okay. How about we shoot for 30 minutes?
You know what this said, because that means I'll probably get 30 more minutes later on. Great, thank you.
So each of you have a couple of handouts from us. I'm gonna be talking through the financial executive summary. This is a nice little 6-page summary of the district's financial statements that are, almost 70 pages now, so a lot easier to get through in this kind of meeting. I know familiar faces here, so I know you guys have been through this with me before, so I don't think it should take too long to get through it. Again, this year, really all pretty positive information for Williamson from an audit standpoint. If you open up to page 1, again, we'll take a look at where the district ended 2024 compared to 2023. And mostly you'll see pretty consistent variances on the right-hand side, mostly due to timing of payments being made and revenues coming in. The big question, most people would ask how the district do this year. The total fund balance you'll see increased by almost $3.3 million down near the bottom right-hand corner. So very positive year there. Of that increase in fund balance, the biggest chunk of that was placed into the capital reserve. We'll talk about the reserves a little bit more on the next page. But really from the general fund standpoint, it was kind of a vanilla year, not anything too exciting, I don't think, from a financial standpoint. So if we move over to page 2, you'll see the activity of the district reserves this year. The overall funding into the reserves at the end of the year was about $3.5 million. The district utilized about 700,000, I apologize, that minus 203 on the bus reserve should be shifted one column to the left. So that kind of screws up the net number there, but overall, the district budgeted the use of reserves, pulled those monies out of the reserves throughout the year. And then at the end of the year replenished those reserves, and then you can see that $3 million or $2.7 million that went into the capital reserves was actually split out between the new transportation vehicle reserve and the 2022 capital building reserve. Great place to have money in reserves right now, I think, especially on the transportation side of things, because those costs will be increasing exponentially over the next 3 to 10 years, depending on what kind of delays get put into the regulations on the zero emissions vehicles.
And then over the past couple of years, cost of buses have gone up just on regular diesel buses, about 25 to 35% each year, so.
Yeah,
And not even including electrification.
Yeah, it's an interesting time in the bus market, because the demand for the diesel buses is growing right now because people are trying to stock up before you're not allowed to purchase them anymore. But the manufacturers also are trying to transition, knowing that they won't be able to sell those buses after a few more years. So it's really increasing the costs all over the place there. So like I said, it's a good place to have some reserves right now. Recently, the district did switch to paying cash for buses, so that's a good thing, that there aren't gonna be debt payments on the current buses when that time comes, because it's gonna be a whole new world to figure out how to finance these purchases the way state aid's paid on those zero emissions buses as well, so. So that's good, like I said, very positive. The district is about $13.5 million in reserve funds at the end of the year. Most of that is in the capital reserve area, which is still under the control of your voters. You have to get permission to use that. But to offset those costs we just talked about, and then future building projects as well. And then on the bottom of the page is just a look at the reserves and fund balance that have been used during the 24 and 25 years to balance the budget. So just kind of informational there. That $275,000 of appropriated fund balance is just about 1% of the budget, which is a pretty good place to be. It does offset the tax levy a little bit. But when the governor's budget projection came out, we had some districts calling us, and we had one district that was looking to use 17% to go out for their 25 budget, and that's certainly not anything we would advise, so just to comment on that, that's a pretty good place to be, I think. If districts start getting up to 7 or 8%, we're considering management letter comments and things like that for that, so pretty good position to be in here in Williamsburg. So the next couple pages, we'll take a look at the budget for the general fund, beginning with the revenues on page 3. And you can see that there was a $2.1 million variance, positive variance on the revenue side of the budget. A big part of that you'll see is up in the use of money and property line. That's the interest earnings that the district has. And we're seeing that a lot. Banks are paying a lot more interest than they have in a long time. But one thing I do just want to mention with the interest is if we take a quick peek back to page 2, you'll see the general fund reserves earned about $466,000 of interest. So that piece isn't really available for the district spending. Though that money, the interest that's earned on the reserve funds has to be reinvested into the reserve funds. So that one kind of looks like a bigger surplus than it is because it's not really accessible to the district. So just to point that out. And then, you know, the other variances in the state aid, due to the timing of the budget approval, the state budget approval, and you know, trying to use conservative estimates when putting the district's budget together to make sure that, you know, things are gonna come in rather than planning on things that don't end up coming in with the state budget approval.
Again, one of the things I would mention too with interest, it was just a couple years ago, or when I first got here, like interest earnings for the year, were around 15 grand, right? And that's how much depository rates have increased.
Pretty rapid increase there, and who knows how that's gonna play out throughout the rest of 25. So, you know, again, a positive variance there on the revenue side. Those are a couple of the items that generated that. And then on page 4, I don't really have too much to comment. You can see again that overall, there was a positive variance of about $2.2 million on the expense appropriation side of the budget. This one, I always like to look at it as a percentage, and that comes out to 8.01% of the general fund budget, which is right where I think I would wanna be if I was operating a school district. The comptroller's office won't say, this is where we want you to be, what's an acceptable variance, but there's been some indications they like the 4 to 8% range. So again, 8's right there at the upper limit there, so that's a good thing. You can see the variances are fairly consistent with last year, with the exception that the general support is up a lot this year. And I think that mostly had to do with the operations and maintenance of plant, you know, so just some savings there on some of those things. But that's a quick run through the general fund. The next page, we have brief summaries of the other operating funds. We don't get into as much detail on these funds because, you know, they're very specific in purpose. Money comes in for that purpose and is spent for that purpose. I would just highlight, you know, the school lunch fund did operate at a surplus this year. I believe, if I remember correctly, there were some equipment purchases last year that contributed to the large loss there. But, you know, really good news there with the districts on CEP, community eligibility this year, so student meals are free, so that generally we see increased participation and to see that there. I will mention that year-end fund balance is getting close to the 3-month average expenditure limit. The federal guidelines suggest that the fund balance shouldn't exceed 3 months average expenditures. I imagine probably in 25, you know, obviously it's early in the year, but the district, I guess I would speculate will probably exceed that 3-month average at the end of 2025, if operations continue as I would expect, unless there's some other purchases. You know, just to make you aware of that, because it's that limit this year would have been 277,000. So if there's another surplus similar to this year during 2025, I imagine we'll be talking about that federal guideline next year. You know, the rest of this page, the debt service fund is pretty straightforward. You'll see the earnings on the debt service fund, that looks like they earned, or that fund earned like a third of the total beginning balance, but that's because the earnings from the capital project also go into the debt service fund because there's some temporary financing out there for the capital project. So the interest earned there goes to the debt service fund to help fund the future payments on that as well. The special aid fund, just about $2 million in revenues and expenses in there. There was about $600,000 in there that still relates to ARPA spending, so stimulus spending, so still some pretty significant extra activity in the special aid fund. Those funds all have to be obligated by the end of this month, so, you know, for next year, we'll probably see that number drop pretty significantly again. at the end of '25. And then the capital projects fund, that new 2022 project, had about $5.3 million in expense. It's just about halfway completed at the end of 2024. That's the most significant piece of the activity, and then about $538,000 on the bus purchases. So, that's really, the capital activity. You guys can probably take a walk down to the fifth grade wing and see how the project's going after this meeting before the board meeting starts.
Lots going on.
To see that. But then you'll see that deficit fund balance there, $3.2 million, that's just because the bonds haven't been issued for that capital project, and the use of temporary financing does create a deficit fund balance there.
No, it's like,
And then the last page on the back, again, this is also in the financial statements, but it's not the way you budget as a district. But we have to put all those funds together and add in the capital assets and the long-term debt of the district like a corporation. So what really the only thing I highlight on here is you will see a deficit unrestricted net position of about $4.3 million. And that is related to the retiree health benefits, the post-employment benefits the district has. That this year, the actuaries determined that liability to be about $8.7 million. And just for reference, I like to mention, I compare this number usually to the annual budget for the general fund, to kind of compare one district to another if they're not the same size. And that number represents 30.46% of next year's budget, which is really, I think, a low, on the lower end of the liability. My rule of thumb is if it's less than your annual budget, you're on the lower end of the spectrum. So 30% is really on the lower end, I would say. Just comparing the districts that I work with throughout Finger Lakes and central New York. So that's a good thing. Any questions on the executive summary? Anything else about the audit or anything that you guys wanna talk about? The one other thing I wanna talk about, we have our management letter, I'm not sure.
it's on for our next meeting, but we can talk about it, go ahead.
So we had one comment in the management letter this year, just relating to school resource officers, and trying to implement a process to review and approve the time that they're on site, that the district is billed by the county. Not sure if there was down in Livingston County area, there was a police chief who resigned and is under investigation by the FBI because he was double dipping, billing the school and, well, allegedly is being investigated as double dipping on those billings. So we're trying to make sure we're reaching out to districts to try to keep that from happening. So not anything I would be super concerned with. I think it's an easy thing to implement. I think it's something that just in general most districts can do going in. You sign a contract for a service, you assume you're gonna get that service.
Especially when it's someone in law enforcement, you expect them to be honorable and
Right.
follow the law. Follow the law.
Kelly, that's the one that's in the regular meeting.
There are a
Yes.
couple
I know.
hot dogs.
So it's just the thought of implementing procedures. to
Yes,
track it.
yeah, and I'll talk about that more in the future meetings, so.
So that's all I have.
The only question I had Jeff answered, when you had said that there was still stimulus.
We have roughly a little, like about, don't pin me down, so we spent about 600 on for the year, and then we have like less than 20 to spend, and I think it's around 10, and we did an extension, we're using it on, at this point, on Lego camp for next summer.
So 600,000 and there's roughly 10,000 left.
Yeah, we
And it's earmarked specific things.
yes,
Yeah.
That was my only question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions? thank you for your time and, it's been a pleasure to work with the district again.
And roughly, just real quick, roughly if you know, how many districts are similar size to us that your office handles?
I would say we've probably got, 20 to 30, I would say, I would put in the same budget bracket in the anywhere from, $20 to $35 million range.
And if you had to compare us to those other roughly 30, doing pretty good, right in the middle, on the bottom scale of?
And I think the district does a great job. I think, like I said, the financial condition, right now is very solid, well positioned moving forward. There are, a lot of questions about the state budget for the next few years, as there has been, it seems like, there always is, I guess. But with the actual move towards potentially changing the funding formulas, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But operationally, like I said, the only comment in the management letter was about the resource officer having some procedures there, so I think things are running very smoothly and there's good checks and balances, really good financial condition, so I love all my clients, but you're definitely
your favorite?
Williamson's definitely doing a good job, I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to meet you.
You as well.
Please tell Tom I said hello.
I will, I'm gonna tell him that you said I did a much better job.
We don't have any public, so no public comment. So I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0, we're done.